Thanks everybody for coming back. John, alcoholic.
Hi, John.
My experience with the third step and my interpretation of the third step has changed dramatically over the years, and I'm grateful for that. When I first was presented with this third step by my sponsor, it really looked like a bad idea. And so I took the third step, and it was kind of like this, God, you handle the alcohol and the drugs, and I'll handle the money and the women. It seemed like a good allocation of responsibilities, because I really know what you guys are saying. Therapists and counselors and judges have been trying to trick me for a long time into doing things I don't want to do, and this is certainly looks like one of them. And I really know what you're saying about turning my will and my life over to God really means that you're never going to have fun again. You're going to be a boring do-gooder, walking old ladies across the street, and you're just going to be kind of a boring nothing. And I believed that for a long time, and really, in hindsight, I haven't, everything I've learned or any observations I've got are in hindsight. And in hindsight, my big problem with the third step is if I turn my will and my life over to the care of God, I will not get what I want. Because the only way I've ever gotten anything in my life that I wanted, or that I thought I wanted, was by exerting self-will. So it stands to reason if my self-will is bad, which it certainly is, that I won't get what I want, and which of course was the wrong question. I thought that I was missing, and Scott does a great job of talking about the bicycle and getting the bicycle and not being happy. I had it completely confused my entire life. If I get what I want, I'll be happy. It's one of those old ideas in the second step. If I get what I want, I'll be happy. And I've always gotten what I wanted. What I really wanted was to be at peace. And I didn't know that until you guys forced me to go through those steps. And I say force me, nobody forced me a bit, right? Until my self-will, as the book says, crushed by a self-imposed crisis, that I had no other options. And this was, with some years in sobriety. The first time I went through that was my definition. And a couple years later, I'm going to give you a little kind of microcosm of my early sobriety. I talked about this last night, so if you were there, forgive me. But this is kind of how my early sobriety worked. I had about 18 months, and I came in with the first wave of young people in AA, and all the cool young kids I was hanging out with had gone back out to drink in, and I zipped right through this 6-month treatment program in 13 months. And my life is still completely unmanageable. It's very intolerable. I just can't get anything right, and I can't get a girlfriend. I just can't. Nothing's really working, and I'm restless, irritable, and discontent. And I know what that feeling is, and I know what that means next. I can only bear this for so long. The fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous could only keep me sober so long, by itself. I still desperately need it, but by itself, it has a shelf life. And I come from a long line of military heroes, and very proud of that. My grandfather was a two-star admiral of the Navy. His sons went through the Naval Academy, and so very prestigious. And the first Gulf War broke out in 1990, and I had an idea. I'm gonna show my family that I'm not a loser. I'm gonna enlist. I'm gonna come back a war hero. It's gonna be great. So I went down to the recruiter the next morning. I enlisted. The next day, I met with my sponsor and asked if it was a good idea. You know what I'm saying? But I knew it was. I just knew in my core that was God's will. I just knew that was God's will. And so they shipped me off to the Navy a number of months later, and that war lasted 6 or 7 days. My vision of being a war hero was gone, and in the Navy at that time, I don't know if they do it today, but they have this practice. It's called the Moment of Truth Day. When you first get there, they shave your head, send your clothes home, and march you for 48 hours. And they bring you in a big room twice the size of this, and you sit Indian style forever. And then some guy comes in and he says, "Listen, today is the Moment of Truth Day. If you've lied about anything to get into the Navy, we'll find out. We're going to investigate. And you'll be discharged with a dishonorable discharge. It'll follow you and humiliate you the rest of your life. But if you're honest with us today, we'll give you a general discharge. So if you lied about drug use, go into this corner and see this officer. If you lied about psychiatric care, go into this corner and talk to this officer. If you lied about being arrested, go into this corner. If you lied about being incarcerated, go into this corner. Well, at this point, I've got a question, right? Questions don't go well in boot camp, especially on day 2. And but it's true. I put my hand up. I said, "Where do you go if you lied about all 4?" He said, "Well, you come with me." And so of my own willpower, and so they put me in the Navy brig for 14 days. So of my own willpower, that's the best I got. I can serve the country for 2 days. And my son thinks that's a funny story. We were at Chipotle, we're there regularly, but last November, and they were giving a discount to veterans, and I had on, the NFL puts out these green jackets for Veterans Day with, like a Redskin flag. I'm embarrassed to say that out loud, but a Redskins thing, but it's got an American flag here too. And she's like, "Oh, you're a veteran, you get a discount." And I'm like, No. And my son goes, Yeah, he's a veteran, give him 10% off. And 2 days is the best I can do of my own willpower, But if chances are, if I have to lie, cheat, and steal, and kind of manipulate to get something, it's probably not in God's will. But I tell you that story because it's kind of funny. And but I can make anything look like God's will that I want to. It's kind of like talking to my sponsor. I cherry pick the best of data to give to him. You know what I mean? But so I got back from that, and I found a hostage, and we got married, and we quickly got divorced, and in no time at all, I found myself in that same restless, irritable, discontent spot, and I ended up going back through these steps again with a sponsor, and to a different level, and and I rode that wave for a long time. What really did it for me was, my sponsor, as I told you, is an African American guy, and we were completely opposite. I mean, he was short. He was really super old. He was about to turn 50, and now that I'm approaching 50, it's not so funny. But he was short, old, African American, very wealthy, and very well educated. I was completely the opposite. And when we did the third step together, and just did a poor 4th step, I did a really poor 4th step, and a really cruddy 5th step with him, I knew, what I was supposed to be doing. My whole perspective, I was no longer kind of a frequent observer of Alcoholics Anonymous, a frequent meeting attender. There's a large difference in here, and in one of I read, I'm a big book guy, right? I love every aspect of this book. I've done my best to prove it's wrong. I don't know the type of alcoholic you are, but I really tried hard to prove that this was wrong. And it's never been wrong about my recovery. I've never done something in here and not gotten the results. And it's never been wrong about my disease. I've tested it, but I like to read other things about the program. And I was reading this book from one of our early friends, Sam Shoemaker. It's called An Extraordinary Life. It's a really cool read. And in it, in talking about the third step, he says, do we really want to know and do God's will, or do we just want God to sanction our will and help us get what we want? And that describes me to a T, right? Because I still have got this old idea that if I get what I want, I'll be happy. And things went on for me for, my life, just giving a poor attempt at these steps, kind of doing it John's way. I got really good results. I'm here to tell you. I mean, they weren't, the book says half measures avail us nothing, and I said, okay, I believe that, and so I'll give you 90%. I'm 95% surrendered, 99% surrendered, at different times. I'm here just to share with you my experience, and that you're 99% surrendered, that 1% will kill you. That 1% will kill you. But, it'll work for a while, and things worked for a while. I found a new hostage/wife 2 days after my wife left, and, we've been married ever since, and, every 9 months and 5 minutes we had another kid, and grew this AA home, and we decided to have this AA home. After our home group, people would come back to our house and just built this life around Alcoholics Anonymous and the principles and the traditions and grew this incredible life, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, my second surrender, and I didn't know I was going to go down this path, but I guess I am, and because I think it's really the only much experience, it's the most valuable thing I have to share with you. I very slowly started getting off this path in Alcoholics Anonymous. 17 years of sobriety, chasing the American dream. And I love the American dream, but it became my higher power, right? Bill says less problems of property, prestige, diverse from our primary purpose. And I allowed those things to diverse from our primary purpose, I'm that, and they're hard to spot. You see that old timer in the meeting, or a long timer, whatever, 10, 15 years, and I'm too, I got all kinds of stuff going on in my life. I'm too afraid to put my hand up, and I really, I got to leave a little bit early, or I got to, just my priorities have switched. I've found a new higher power, as Scott was talking about, and it almost killed me. And then I told you about what happened in that 1 year period of time. Everything had crashed down on me. My wife had a nervous breakdown. She had, our marriage was on the tilt, and she was getting ready to leave, and we were deciding we were going to try to save our marriage. And it's funny, when we were going through this, and because her first marriage had ended that way. Her husband had been unfaithful, and I was unfaithful to her. And I knew, and that's always a problem. If you ever hear me start a sentence like "I know," like I got this, like the danger zone. And I knew that our marriage wasn't fixable because of what had happened to her before. And I just knew she'd never, again, notice that sentence, I knew. I just knew she'd never be able to put this bat down, that the rest of our life, or potential life, she'd beat me with this offense that I committed. And the reason why I thought that is because I hadn't had the experience that she had had. See, she had gone through these 12 steps. She had gone through the fourth and fifth step and gone through exactly as it's outlined in here, and got free of that experience. She no longer carried that into this relationship. Anyways, and so as we were deciding what we were going to do, and every turn I took, it just was a bad, I could not make a right decision to save my life. And at the end of all that madness that I told you about, foreclosure, and this business got repossessed by the guy that owned it, and I went from making big six figures to $50,000 a year with a couple $100,000 a year worth of expenses, and things were going south, and I knew I was going bankrupt, and I fell off a ladder from 16 feet, and I broke my arm at 90 degrees, and it was pointing the wrong direction. I broke my pelvis in 3 places, and I'm just trying to recover from this, and I'm laying in a lazy boy chair for 6 weeks. At the beginning, I couldn't walk from me to Ben to use the bathroom. It was just a terrible experience, and I was stuck with myself. One of my great teachers is this guy Richard Rohr, that many of you know. I don't know him personally, but I love his readings. Talks about we have to get to the end of ourselves, and we have to make this transition from the first half of life to the second half of life. The first half of life is where we build this container that we're going to identify ourselves with, whether it's a degree or a rank in the military, or whatever it is. I'm CEO, or I'm president, I'm the captain. All these things that we want to identify ourselves with, and those things eventually fail us, and we get to that second half of life where it's we get concerned about what we're going to put inside that container instead of building that container. And all that self-pity, Scott pointed out that I had no use. I couldn't provide for my family. I couldn't keep it married. I couldn't do anything right, it seemed. Sorry to say. And 6 weeks in that lazy boy chair, and I couldn't take it anymore. And I, found myself at 2 o'clock in the morning in the kitchen, crying like a schoolgirl. And the best I can come up with of my own power is, do I use a rifle or do I use a shotgun? 19 years sober. That's the best I got of my own power. I had stopped connecting to that power. I believe we all have this umbilical cord that connects us to God, and that power flows one direction and it never stops. It flows into us, and it can flow other directions, right? But we don't We don't feed this power source back to God. It comes to us, and we can disperse it out like a colander. And I had this moment of clarity at 2 o'clock in the morning. I was like, man, AA doesn't work. Look at my life, man. I'm like a loser's loser, and I'm physically sober. And I said that great AA prayer that we all have to say, whether it's at 19 days or 19 years or whatever it is. We all have to get to this point, and that's, God, fix me or kill me. I'll do anything. I'll do anything. But just fix me or kill me quick. And I made a decision to as Scott says, to be one of his guys, to go through these steps with no reservation whatsoever, to treat this book like it was an instruction manual. And at the end of the day, what I came out of this experience with, and is that the third step really means, if I say anything to you today about the third step, is that the rest of my life is none of my business. That's what the third step means, right? When I start managing, I get so much less done in my life. But when I truly become a volunteer, as Scott says, just incredible things happen through us, not by us, but through us. We just get to be the instruments. I mean, what has happened in my last couple of years of my life is just incredible. That experience was, a dozen or so years ago. But as we continue to grow in understanding and effectiveness and continue to seek God and be one of his guys or be one of his gals and just be an instrument, anything can happen. I mean, it's just amazing. I've never tried to tap into that power and that power not be there. I'll share with you a little story, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Scott. A couple years ago, my wife, as I told you, I'm a big Nats fan. Big Nats fan. Season ticket holder, big Nats fan. Did I say I'm a big Nats fan? They were in the playoffs a couple years ago, and my wife and I were planning. We had reserved, had tickets to go to this event, this marriage conference. It was a religious-based marriage conference, and I was really excited. And the next day, we were going to go up to, New York for our anniversary. And anyways, I, through self-will, kind of run riot. I kind of messed up the day, but what happened in this conference was really incredible. This guy came out and he said, what's the most important characteristic when you're picking a spouse or a partner? It was like the first thing the guy said, and he was talking about a man, for women, when you pick a man. And he says, the most important characteristic is that they be a holy man. And I looked at her and I said, you're in trouble. Right. Because to me that means, perfect or, sinless or, whatever you want to call it. And then he took some time and he said, well, what does that mean? And he said, what a holy person is in his mind is a person whose God's power and transformative power is displayed on your life. And that's what our job to do is in here, is to clear away the wreckage of the past, to remove what's blocking us, so that God's power can be on display. So that the next guy goes and says, hey, how did you do this? Show me how to do this. I've got another story, but I'm going to tell it later. And so Scott's over here scratching himself like a scared dog, like he's not going to get the microphone. So I'm going to turn it over.
I appreciate that analysis. You going to do all of my fourth step next time? just that little piece.
That's it.
I see. Thank you very much. I'm Scott Lee. I'm alcoholic, and thrilled to be here again. Ben, thank you, and Lee, thank you for all that you do for us. I don't know that I would have made it without guys like him recording these conferences. I don't know that I would have made it. The first problem I had with the third step is, but what if I turn it over to God and he does a lousy job with it? And I think that's the alcoholic's great dilemma. What if I turn it over to God and he does a lousy job with it? And it helps me to take a look at the kind of job I've done, which is, I think, a little bit about what this step work is about. And I'm going to take off down a rabbit trail here. I hope I get back. I have discovered, I believe, what God's will is for me, and I'm going to share it with you. I believe it's his will for me to make mistakes. It's not okay that I make mistakes. It's my assignment. In my own particular religious beliefs, the job of being perfect is already taken. So there's not a place where I can send a resume, get interviewed, and I can be perfect. It's not my assignment to be perfect. If it's not my assignment to be perfect, what's my assignment? Clearly, it's to make mistakes, and I'm good at it. And I've been told all my life we learn from our mistakes. Well, if that's true, no one in this room has been arrested more than once. Good luck. Yeah. So that's not true. Guys like me, we don't learn from our mistakes. We learn from living with the results of our mistakes. Read the steps and hold that thought. You'll notice about half of them are about me embracing the results of my mistakes. That's literally what the step work is about. And that's, for me, where the learning occurs. So this is the learning process. And we use the word progress. Let me give you my definition of progress. Progress is making the same old mistake a little less often, or making a new and finer quality of mistake. All right? Because anything beyond that's perfection. That's not my assignment. It's just not my assignment. So here's the learning process as I understand it today. Item 1, make a mistake. Item 2, be notified I made the mistake. I don't always know. Item 3, own the mistake. Don't lie my way out of it. Don't give you the head and shoulders fake. Yes, Your Honor, that was me. All right. Item 4, talk to a spiritual advisor about that and get some advice on how to, item 5, make the amends. Item 6 is to embrace the lesson, because a mistake is simply an invitation to a lesson. The evidence is, if I had already learned the lesson, I would not have made the mistake. A mistake is just a lesson dressed in its work clothes. That's all it is. So that next piece is to embrace the lesson, to learn the lesson. The next piece is to share the lesson, which is really what sets it for me. And the last piece that I've picked up so far is that when I share the lesson, I have to tell you I made the mistake. If I just share the lesson, I'm preaching and nobody wants to hear it. When I stand as a sinner next to a sinner, you can hear me. And that's what makes page 18 in italics. But the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, who is properly armed with the facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of the alcoholic in a few hours. Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. My dark past becomes my greatest asset if I'll turn it over to a higher power. Page 60. So this is, let me tell you first, we can't be thorough here. I think the only step we're really going to be thorough on is 4 tomorrow. But we realize we're not getting it all. That's not our mission. I think if we have a mission, it's to make those who haven't done these steps hungry to do them, and to take the fright away from them. They're all very easy. Some are kind of long, but they're real easy. So this is what I do with my new guy. A, that you're alcoholic, convince me. I want to hear all about the times you quit forever, didn't stay quit. I want to hear about you getting drunk on nights where you're sure you weren't going to. Tell me all about it. The longer he talks at this point, the better, because he's setting his own cornerstone. He's giving me information I'm going to need later to keep him moving when he tries to settle for relief, and I need to get him all the way to recovery. And B, you can't manage your own life. So let's hear about your management skills. I notice you manage your way out of a job, you manage your way out of a school, you manage your way out of a marriage, you managed to break your mother's heart. Tell us some more about your management skills. All right, so we've enjoyed about all of that we can stand. B, that probably no human power could have relieved alcoholism. Who tried? Cops, courts, judges, wife, I forgot where I was, wives, parents, siblings, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors of various kinds. You, who tried? And none of them were successful. And I'll guarantee you, as their sponsor, I can't relieve your alcoholism. Is B true for you? Because if it is, I would propose to you that if there's not a loving God, game, set, and match, you lose. I'm simply going to ask you to place a wager that you can win. Why don't you bet that there is? We've already got the God concept, and it says, see that God could. Well, this God we talked about is powerful and would. Well, let's see. Gentle, loving, eager to forgive, wants what's best for me, available to me all the time, has a sense of humor. I say he would if he were sought. Not found. God's not lost. Does not require to be found. Simply sought. There's page 57. I can't believe I didn't get this. There's no way we're going to get this done. Page 57. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. At such times a great revulsion has risen up in him. Seemingly he could not drink if he would. God had restored his sanity. Here's the first of 2 places in the book I found that promise sanity. I do not find a place that promises manageability. I have fired me as general manager of my own life based on my performance. A good manager would have fired me about 3 decades ago. And this morning, one of the first things I did was I invited God in to run my life today. Not help me, but take me. Help me and take me are not the same prayer. It says, what is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Circumstances made him willing to believe. In other words, I worked myself into a crack I couldn't lie my way out of. He offered himself to his maker, then he knew. He didn't say, help me, he said, take me. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. There's that promise again. To this man of revelation, some grow to it more slowly. Here is maybe the most powerful promise in this book. He has come to all who have honestly sought him. I like the analogy that God's kind of like the mother of a 3-year-old playing hide and seek with her child. Where does she hide? She hides where the child can find her. This is my heavenly parent. Where does he hide? Yeah. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. My third sponsor picked up the nickname Rusty. At the end of his drinking, he was drinking mouthwash mixed with Kool-Aid, and he wet his pants so many times his zipper rusted shut. And we nicknamed him Rusty in honor of the zipper. And a little aside there. But he used to say, in the history of planet Earth, no human has ever been put in an insane asylum for being insane, never, not once. They put us in there for acting insane. And none of us has ever been let out for being sane. They let us out for acting sane. And so on those days when I'm crazy, if I don't act on it, they don't know. They don't know. Don't tell them. They're not ready. Tell us. One of the great truths about our fellowship is that we're not all crazy on the same day. Call somebody you love in this fellowship and be crazy with them, but don't act on it, and they won't know. Back on page 60. Being convinced, we're at step 3. Convinced of what? How about A, B, and C? Which is that we decided to turn our will and life over to God as we understood him. In the short form, the step says over to the care of God. And Jerry said, I would observe that step 3 is not where we turn our will and life over to God, over the care of God. For if we could do that at step 3, we would have a 3-step process. What could be left after that? Step 3 is where we decide to. The English verb to decide comes from the Latin verb scisere, which means to cut. A surgeon makes an incision, he cuts in. I make a decision, I cut away all of the other options to act upon the one I have decided. That's what the word means. What do we mean and what do we do? The first requirement, there are requirements. There must be more than one if there's a first. Be convinced that any life run on self-will can never be a success. I ask him, we see how well yours has been going. On that basis, we're almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are collision, blam, bent metal, broken glass, blood, screaming. That's collision. That's different from mildly disconcerted on rare occasion. Collision. It says, even though our motives are good. And I want to share a lesson with you. And I had been sober a pretty good while. And I was a commissioned salesman. I was a multi-line manufacturer's rep. I represented a number of companies in the hardware industry. And there was a purchasing agent at my largest account. He represented 1/3 of my income. He was capable of doubling my income by taking items that he bought from other manufacturers and putting them with my manufacturers, and he was doing so. I represented great manufacturers, and I gave him great representation. We're close friends. Our wives are friends. We're guests in each other's homes. My phone rings one day, and he says, my wife just gave birth. And I'm close enough to know this is not good news. We're 2 months early. And he says, we're at Vanderbilt Hospital. It is not going well. Would you come pray over this child? And I said, you bet. I hop in my car, and I drive to Vanderbilt. He knows where I live. And I live 10 to 15 minutes from Vanderbilt Hospital, depending on a couple of traffic lights. And I'm doing what I've been hearing in meetings, checking my motives, and I cannot answer the question. Am I going to that hospital to pray over this child to look good to him, so put another $100,000 in my pocket, or am I going to the hospital to pray over that child to bring spiritual relief to this family? And I cannot answer the question. And I pull into the parking spot, and I can't answer the question. I'm out of time. And I go to the source. And I don't ask you to believe this came from God. You need to know that I believe it did. And I said, God, I think I need an answer. I think I need one right now. And what I got was a gift. And it was a thought, but it was different from a thought. And I don't know how to explain that to you. But it was a question. The question was, does going into a hospital to pray over a sick child violate any of your principles? No. Then go ahead and do it. For there are no wrong reasons for doing the right thing. We don't care why Scott did the right thing. We care that Scott did the right thing. And that was where I learned, and to this day cannot find an exception. I have to get out of the motive business. Page 60 says I can't trust my motives. I can't. It's good to have good motives. I'm not against good motives. But trusting my motives is one of the ways I play God. I hope to get that in a couple of minutes. But principle always trumps motive. Cliff Roach, don't go to bed tonight. He already mentioned Cliff. He was one of my teachers too. The Cliffer said, the 12 traditions are a set of principles designed to protect A from my very best motives. That's exactly right. That's what principles do, is they protect us from our motives. This is a little bit deep, but I'm going to try it on you. When I operate from motive, I'm governing the outcome, irrespective of action. When I operate from principle, I govern action, irrespective of outcome. So we talk about turn it over. What is it I turn over? The answer is the result. How do I do it? One is I stay in today where God is. The second piece is I operate within His principles and let Him do the results. When I operate from motive, I'm making it come out the way I think it should. I think ends justify means. They don't. And I get all of that out of this sentence. Almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Step 12 does not say, and have good motives in all our affairs. Practice these principles in all our affairs. Principle never gets me in trouble. Motive does. I'm going to skip an awful lot just because we got a time constraint here. Middle of page 61, 2 sentences in a row begin with the words, is he not? I'm going to read the second one. It's middle of page 61. Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if he only manages well? What that says is that I'm so insane that I actually think if I can get what I want, it'll make me happy. I have failed to notice the tens of thousands of times that I got what I wanted, was not rendered happy. John referenced one of my examples. We're going to do a show of hands again. Who, when you were a child, wanted a bike? You were certain if you could get a bike, you'd be happy, and you got a bike. Anybody? Great. Are you happy? Well, let's try another one. Who wanted him or her? Sure, you get him or her, you'd be happy, and you got him. Come on, admit it. All right, now you could be sitting with him. I'm not going to ask you the other question. I'm not trying to get you in trouble, trying to make a point. Who's sure you get rid of him or her, you'd be happy. Right? So I got to look at the truth, and the truth is getting what I want ain't going to make me happy. It never did. Never did. That's what this says. A delusion is a psychotic belief. It's a false belief. Rest, W-R-E-S-T, comes from the same root word as the word wrestle. It means to take by tugging and pulling. And what that says is that I'm so insane, if I think I can get what I want, it'll make me happy. I'm like the dog chasing the fire engine. What am I going to do? Lady friend of mine tells a story. She went to a dog race. She paid her $2. She got her ticket. And the mechanical rabbit took off, and the cages pop open. They shot the gun. The dogs take off. And the mechanical rabbit malfunctioned and stopped just before the first turn. And the lead dog, now he's muzzled, but the lead dog hits this rabbit in third gear, and he and this rabbit are tail over teacup into the ditch. And I was wondering where she was going. And she says, you know, I'm just like that dog. I'm shot out of a gun chasing some dead-gum mechanical rabbit that ain't going to be what I want if I can catch it. And then she said, you know, that dog is smarter than I am. They have to retire that dog. He will never chase another mechanical rabbit. He's done. Not me. I'm after the next one. I thought, oh, jeez. Yeah, right? Yeah, you bet. Minor case of insanity. Turning the page, at page 60, selfishness, self-centeredness that we think is the root of our troubles. Now, chapter 5 says I'm supposed to be on a path. Well, things with roots don't travel. So if this thing is the root of my troubles, it's going to have to go. Selfishness, self-centeredness. Driven by 100 forms of fear, driven. That's different from disconcerted on rare occasion. Driven by 100 forms of fear. Fear is the concern I will not get my will at some time in the future. Self-delusion, I believe my own BS. I've only got 2 brain cells left. One of them creates BS, the other one buys it. Self-seeking, I'm really sorry I had to run over you, but you see, you were standing between me and what I wanted, and I'm not thinking about you at all. Self-seeking. Self-pity, poor me, I didn't get what I wanted sometime in the past. Poor me, I'm not getting what I want right now. Poor me, poor me, pour me a drink. Driven by those things, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation. We invariably find that sometime in the past, we made decisions based on self, later put us in a position to be hurt. If you were abused as a child, that is an exception to this. It was not your fault. And you didn't do anything to deserve that. We're not talking about that. At this point, Jerry said to me, how'd you like some good news? I said, I'd like some good news. He said, how'd you like some really good news? I said, I'd really like some really good news. How'd you like the best news you're ever going to get in your whole life? I said, I'm open, hit me. He says, so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. Was that it, Jerry? Yeah, that was it. I don't get it. He said, if it really is the cops, the courts, the judges, the Russians, the Chinese, your future ex-wife, her mother, and their lawyer, if those people really are the problem, game, set, and match, you lose. The good news is that you are the problem. And if you will bring some willingness to this party, we can work on that. It didn't seem like it at the time. I think it's the best news I've ever got in my entire life. Because as long as I'm the problem, we can work on it. If they are the problem, I lose. They arise out of ourselves. The alcoholic's an extreme example of self-reliant, though I didn't think so. Above everything. I wonder if that's important. That's somewhere in the middle, I suppose. Above everything, we must be rid of this selfishness. We give us sort of a mediocre reason, or it kills us. God makes that possible. I had trouble with that for my first 5 years. I thought we were insulting God. I really did. And this is what I've come to believe. I just share this as my own experience. I believe that when I was put in this skin, that one of the things I was given was this thing we call free will. And God said, test drive this. And I set out to do so. When I get to step 3, and I take a real serious look at how it's been going, what I have to say to him is, I'd like to trade in this self-will for your will, sight unseen. It can't be as bad as mine. And I'm going to try not to complain. I'm going to try not to have any questions. I won't be able to do those, but that's going to be my mission. But until I do that, I believe God intervenes in lives. Guys like me don't have 2,500 hours of flying time as an active alcoholic and survive. I flew combat drunk. So we don't. There's divine intervention, but there is a limit. I can't quantify this. But I think there's a limit to how much God will intervene in a life until I get to the place where I'm willing to say something like the third step prayer. Not help me, but take me. And at that point, I release God from the handcuffs that he placed upon himself of how much he will intervene in my life, to intervene more in my life. And those of you who have done this third step prayer know what I'm talking about. We call them coincidences, but they happen all the time. Stuff, Dane just told us about a fabulous one. I mean, this stuff just keeps happening to us. But I believe God will honor that gift he gave me of self-will all the way to my death if I insist on it. And most of us in this room have seen it, and we're going to see it again. And it is because God is gentle. He won't force me to his will. And because he honors the gift he gave me of free will. And until I'm willing to say, no, thank you, I don't want it anymore, he will limit how much he'll intervene. And that helped me get past this. I don't know if that's worth anything to you. It meant the world to me. And it says, there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. It tells me that twice in this paragraph. I'm going to skip a little. This is the how and the why. First of all, we had to quit playing God. Then they give us kind of a mediocre reason. It didn't work. You know the first rule of cavalry? When the horse is dead, dismount. No, not me. Yeah, big fella, come on, we could. And it's similar to the first rule of holes. Of when you're in one, stop digging. Don't try to dig your way out of the hole. It's not a good plan. I had a guy named Bob Olson. Don't go to bed tonight without getting one of Bob Olson's talks. And I had him trapped in a hotel lobby for 3 hours one day, firing questions at him. And I think he got tired. And he finally said, let me ask you one. I thought, all right, St. Scott's going to get a chance to impress Bob Olson. What's your question, Bob? He said, there on page 62, you agreed to quit playing God. I said, yes. He said, how did you play God? I said, I don't know. And he said, now, I can't put them back together. He gave me 3 or 4. I've added some. Here's some of the ways I played God. I became angry when someone died. And that's me saying, I know who should die and how and when. Wow, is that playing God? I tried to manage my own life and the lives around me. The closer you were to me, the harder I tried to manage your life. I judged people. And I know that because I had resentments. And the only way to get a resentment is to judge someone, find them guilty, feel anger, and then feel that anger again. Is that feeling again of old anger. That is resentment by definition. If I had resentment, I must have judged, because that's the genesis of it. I trusted my motive. I told you before, that's how I play God. Trusting my motive instead of being involved in principle. I needed to know. I asked the question, why? Why is not a spiritual question. It just isn't. It's a management question. I was sure I was right about everything I knew for sure, and anyone who disagreed with me was clearly a fool. And not only is that playing God, it also blocks any chance I have to learn anything. I also told lies. Excuse me, once again, that's me making it come out the way I think it should come out. It's one of the ways that I play God. That's a few of them. It says, we had to quit playing God, it didn't work. Next, we decided, so here's this decision referenced in the short form of the step. We decided that hereafter in this realm of life, God is going to be our director. He's the principal, we're his agents, he's the father, we're his children. So I say to my new guy that I'm sponsoring, are you prepared to make that decision? You want a couple of days? I'll give them to you. We're not playing games here. All right, this is heavy duty stuff. And if he's ready, I say, I want that back into first person singular. And he will say, I have decided that hereafter this drama of life, God is going to be my director. He's the principal, I'm his agent. He's the father, I'm his child. And I will say to him, I think you made a great decision. I want to make a pact with you, a deal. And the pact is that that decision will stand unless you go insane and choose to change it. And if you do, you'll formally change it with me or one of my successors. Do we have a deal? We shake on it. My third step decision stands. My implementation is better on some days than others. I use some form of that third step prayer virtually every day. But my decision stands. And I think you're familiar with the third step promises up here, but they tell me that I'm going to be getting out of self, which is the thing that I need desperately. I think the next part of the step is to understand the prayer. Can't pray it till you know what it says. Offer myself to thee, not help me, but take me. Build with me. Sometimes to build, we're going to tear some down stuff that's already standing there. If you're new, I got some news for you. Some things you like to keep are leaving. They are not coming back. Some things you don't like are coming. They're going to stay. 2 bowling balls. My will, God's will. Pick one. I said to Jerry one time, I said, man, I'm hearing spiritual side of the program this and spiritual side of the program that. There's a spiritual side of the program. There's got to be at least one other side. What's the name of it? He said, there are 2 sides. There's the spiritual side and the drunk side. Pick one. I have to pick the spiritual side. The drunk one didn't work for me. That's how I got here. So to build with me and do with me as thou wilt, relieve me of the bondage. I looked it up. It means slavery. I've been slave to self. That I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties. Victor of them may bear witness to those I would help with thy power, thy love, thy way of life. May I do thy will always. The word amen does not appear. There is one theme that runs wider and deeper in this work than any other, and that is the help others theme. I found it in 52 places, beginning on Roman numeral 11, going through Dr. Bob's story. The first time I went through reading the book looking for it, I found it 52 times. The count's over 60 now. That's an awful lot. The help others is all over the place. The next part of the step, it says, we thought well. You want some time to think about it? Give it some thought. And it says, we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, spiritual advisor, and the new guys I sponsor can take their third step prayer with anybody they like, and me. And the reason is my experience has been somewhere between the beginning of the second stop and the end of 9, somewhere in there something huge happens. And someone who's been there and is connected needs to be present. I've had the experience of a guy doing his third step prayer, unable to come up off his knees, just dissolve in tears. Someone who knows what to do needs to be there to hold him while he cries. If he wants his wife to be there and his kids and his preacher, I'm good with that. But I will be present. That's just what I do. And it says the wording's quite optional. That means that's an invitation for you to write your own prayer. And one of the songwriters that I sponsored in Nashville, in Nashville we have a bylaw out of central office. You can't get a 5-year chip if you don't sponsor at least 3 songwriters, because somebody's got to take them. And this one particular songwriter that I was sponsoring said, yeah, I'm going to write my own. That's great. About 3 days later, he hands me this thing. It's in verse. It's 3 stanzas. It's beautiful. I won't be surprised if we hear it on the radio. It left out the part about God being in charge, which I thought was kind of important. And the most frequent rewrite that I see is that people don't like the old English, thee and thou. Change it to you. But I have seen some beautiful, Burke Harlan, don't go to bed tonight without getting Burke Harlan talk. Lee's got it. He knows I'm here. He always brings Burke. Burke's the most spiritual man I ever expect to know. And I wish I had a copy of his third step prayer. It was beautiful. And then the last piece is to pray the prayer. So I break the third step down into about 9 pieces. The first one is the bottom of page 60, where we're convinced that the life rail on self-will can't be a success. The second piece is the acknowledgement that I've got to get out of the motive business. It doesn't work. The third piece is to acknowledge that I've been playing God, and with His help, because I can't stop it myself, that's done. The fourth piece is this formal decision. The fifth piece is to read and understand the prayer. The sixth piece is to decide who are going to be the witnesses. The seventh piece is to either write your own prayer or make the decision to use the one that's here. The eighth piece is to schedule a time and place, and the ninth piece is to pray the prayer. And what I find is to break it down into little bites like that makes it awfully easy. John and I are going to have the privilege tomorrow morning of doing My Great Passion, which is step 4, and we're going to do it like that. And although we have done some high spotting here on steps 1, 2, and 3, we're not going to high spot 4. We're going to go to all the depth that I know. I'm sure all know all the depth that John knows. You got something before we invite people to pray the prayer?
Yeah, I wanted to share a couple of things. We talk about why being a management question, and one of the things for me that blocks, as I said, I believe that all this is about removing what's blocking us, and for me, what's blocking me in the third step is this idea of how. This has really just been a thread throughout my life in the last year or so. I went to this other conference, and this guy was talking about how is the blocker of everything. All of the progress in our life, whether it's material, financial, relational, spiritual, how is blocking us. How am I going to get rid of all this pain and anger, and how am I going to make these things right? And I found it really just jumped out at me that in my 5th edition that Bill grouped the how and the why together. They're equally as important, and just share with you a little how that's worked in my life in the last year or two. As I told you, I haven't really talked about this at all from a microphone, so I don't know how this is going to come out. But as I told you, I went as a young guy, I got sober. I went to the nation's first recovery high school in Maryland. It was really cool. 30, 50 little drunks and junkies trying to stay sober together, trying to get education together, which was a really incredible concept. I'm really going to go down this rabbit hole. The reason why it was a really cool concept for me is that, when a youth is getting sober, go to 20-day treatment and they come out, we put them back in the same environment where they buy, sell, and use drugs, right? When an adult gets out of treatment, we say stay away from people, places, and things, and so it's just an extra, it's a different path of getting sober, a different barrier in front of youth getting sober. So this is a passionate thing to me. And about 5 years ago, this group approached me in D.C. said, "Hey, we're going to start a recovery high school." This guy didn't know anything about my story. He actually came to my office for some printing needs. He said, "Hey, we're starting a recovery high school in Washington, D.C. Would you like to volunteer?" And I said, "Have you heard my story?" And he was just blown away. Anyways, but that little movement in Washington, D.C. Failed, about a year. They just couldn't get enough fire going underneath them. And so March of last year, myself and another woman who was on that committee, were going to a group in Baltimore to do a group inventory for them. And we were driving, and there was this long silence, and I told her, I said, we got to do this, right? And she's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "This recovery high school thing, we need to do one in Maryland." And because the old one had shut down 15 years ago. They had a fire and never restarted during the recession. And so she said, "Well, how are we going to do this?" I got no idea how we're going to do this. Like, I don't have a high school diploma. I don't know how we're going to start a high school, but we're going to do this. And she said, "Okay, we're going to do this." And we just prayed and turned it over to God and surrendered it to God. And next thing you know, all these people start falling in our lap. Educators, administrators, bankers. We start talking. "Yeah, I'll help. I'll help make this happen." And this was like a year and a half ago. And every night that I would lay in bed thinking about this, it was always the how that was the problem, right? How are we going to get the money to do this. And we just, through constant prayer, the how has gotten fixed, you know. And it's one of those things, right? Like if I take the motive out of it and put the principle into it, and it's God's will to happen, it's going to happen. And the money just showed up. My favorite saying, I don't listen to much what Scott says, that, you know, for 12 years of sponsorship, it's getting kind of old. But
I did the best I could with him. You should have seen him when I got him.
that's true. God's got plenty of cash, and he knows where to send it, you know. Take the how out of it. And so we just started walking down this path, and people started throwing money at us. You know, checks would just start arriving. And last year, around this time, we did a little gala, and we raised, you know, some money, and we really got some momentum going, and things started super growing. And 3 or 4 months ago, this guy heard about what we were doing, and he, long story short, gave us a $2 million building and gave us $100,000 cash to refurbish the building however we want. You know, but for me, the block was, how are we going to get a building? You know, how are we going to get the money? And one of the howls was, you know, how are we going to find, you know, get the people involved? And that all happened. And the reason why I really has been on my mind today, one of the members of our board of directors was on a flight last night and happened to be sitting next to the aide to the First Lady of the United States. And they had a 3-hour flight, and they started yakking it up. And by the end of the conversation, she's like, hey, you know, the aide was so enamored with what we're doing. She said, well, can we match calendars, because we want to have the First Lady come out and visit your recovery high school. You know, like that the how just gets taken care of. You know, and with these steps, how am I going to, you know, there's no way she's going to let me back. There's no way my family's going to let me back at the Thanksgiving Day table. There's no way I can make this right with my business partners. The how. And our job is just to get in here and do the footwork. You know, when I talked about that period of time when, you know, I was really trying to figure God out, I converted to a religion that I really like, and in that process, I'm a Catholic, and in that process, you pick a saint that you want to emulate. And I chose St. Augustine. And the reason why I chose St. Augustine was that he had this prayer that I really liked. And the prayer was, God, please make me pure, just not right now. Right? Like that was my attitude. Like you know, just give me a little bit of God, you know. And I got in this habit of, you know, saying the third step prayer every day like it was a magic bullet. Like as long as I just get up and say my prayers and say the third step prayer, like I'll stay sober, right? And so I really, when this part talks about the wording being optional, if I'm taking a guy through the steps, especially for the second time, I don't let him say this, right? This is not about learning some prayer, you know, and getting God to do a magic trick for us. And I think, you know, the best prayers are the ones that we come up with. You know, and if you're really new in here, I got no idea. I mean, the best prayer is, God, I got no idea if you're out there. In fact, I really don't believe you're out there. But I got no other choice. You know, please help my raggedy ass. Excuse the expression. You know, God, I got nothing for you. You know, show me the way. That's, for me, that's much better than rattling off the third step prayer, you know, like we're doing, tricking God into doing something for us.
I didn't know that.
Well, you haven't stopped talking long enough for me to share it with you. Just kidding.
Yeah, I know. I know that. We're approaching the end here, and I'd like to do one of two things. I guess we'll take a group conscience on it. I was in one of the gated communities a lot of years ago. For those of you who have done corrections, the guys in there are suffering from testosterone poisoning. Serious case of it. And there was about 20 of them sitting there, and we did the serenity prayer, and it sounded more like an invitation to a fight. God, grant me the serenity. And I thought, I can't listen to them do that to the Lord's Prayer. I just can't. And at the end of the meeting, I said, we're going to do something a little bit unusual. I asked everyone to remain seated. I think we're going to do this.
Okay.
And so I'm going to ask you to remain seated. We invited God tonight. I believe he came. And if you borrowed my God and you got touched, borrow him again. If you invited your God, please keep doing that. That's what those moments of silence before the meeting are for. I think it'd be really appropriate for all of us to take a moment and just thank him. And then what I'd like to do is slowly, I say again slowly in case there are Yankees here, slowly, because I can't pray as fast as the Yankees can, slowly whisper the Lord's Prayer. I would note that amen is the last word. And I'd like to have a few moments of silence after amen and ask you to let your spirit out of your body and feel the love in this room. I'll let you know when that second moment of silence is over. Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power, and glory, forever and ever. God bless us all. Safe travel. We're going to take a 12-hour break. 12 hours and 2 minutes, actually.